Welcome. Hi, how are you? Welcome back to the I Help Men Dress Better podcast, where I help men connect who they are with how they show up, using style as a catalyst for self-improvement. This is a momentous occasion for all two of my listeners, who I'm actually very grateful for because I know you all personally. So if you're listening to this, thank you so much. And if you've listened to every episode, super extra thank you. This is the 30th episode, which means that it's a round number and it's a multiple of 10 and 3. So yeah, there are 52 weeks in a year, and I have managed to do more than half a year's worth of podcast episodes, which is pretty huge. I recently had like around a month lapse, which I think was my first kind of big dip, but we're back on the wagon. I'm very excited. This morning, I I went to present at a networking group that I've been going to for a while now called 1 Million Cups. They're all over the country. I go to the one in Chicago, and it's pretty exciting. It actually got sprung on me relatively last minute. I don't know about last minute, but relatively last minute. So I had been going for a few months, and a number of people were like, "Hey, you should present." And I was like, "I know I should present. Like, but you've been coming here forever. You should present." "Yeah, I know I should present." And one of the organizers mentioned to me, like, "Hey, why don't you present like for Fashion Week? You're in fashion and style. You should, we could have like a style and clothing centered presentation for Fashion Week." And I said, "Yeah, that sounds really great." I knew what the dates were for Fashion Week. What I didn't know, we'll get there. So a friend of mine who I met through business coaching group that I was part of. Me and her, we get together twice a week, once to do a sort of session together where we, go over what went right, what went wrong, and what we're looking to do over the course of the week, or we're looking to accomplish. And then we also do a little bit of body doubling, which you should check it out, especially if you have ADHD. Body doubling, which is essentially you just work with somebody, so it sort of keeps you accountable to get the work done. But I was talking to her, and she's like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure that these dates that we usually meet up are, Jewish holidays for you." And I was like, "Yeah, let me check on that." Yeah, they are. Those are Jewish holidays for me. And so I sat down and I put all the Jewish holidays and when they fall out this year into my calendar. And as I'm doing that, I noticed that one of them falls out of the last days of one of those holidays, falls out smack on that Wednesday of Fashion Week. So essentially, when I had not committed, but been interested in presenting. So, and I looked back over my calendar and I realized that starting next Wednesday all the way through mid October, yeah, late September through mid October, I am not going to be able to attend any of those networking events. So I reached out to this organizer and I was like, "Hey, I can't present this week. I can't present pretty much any week in that time frame." And he's like, "We don't have a presenter for the 17th. I think this was maybe like the 9th or something. So literally a week out." And he's like, "Do you want to do it?" I was like, oof. I felt that like anxiety in my gut. And I try to, when it really does I try to push myself to do things that make me uncomfortable. Not always. I'm not always good about it. But when I can, I try to. And so I agreed. So thankfully, so yeah, this morning I presented at this local chapter, and it was really, really nice experience. I had a bit of a challenging morning. I woke up really early. First of all, I just get really anxious about being late to places. And so I woke up really early and I ended up I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get there early. I'm going to review my cards, review my presentation. I'll have a half hour before things start to just relax." And I ended up driving through an area of the city that is underground. So my maps couldn't tell me where to get off. And I missed my turn and I ended up on a highway and had to turn back around and go a whole circuitous route, which added a half hour to my trip. And I lost all of the extra time that I had planned for. So thank God I planned for that extra time because, oh, That would have been a disaster. But thankfully I presented, and that's sort of what I want to talk about. I know that that's a very long introduction to what I want to talk about, but that's what's going on with me. And now something that came up around this presentation, it really made me think, and I wanted to share some of my thoughts around this. So during the presentation, I could feel myself, like my chest was like, and I got that feeling. I don't know if you've ever had this when you're public speaking, or, maybe you're just in a social situation and maybe you have some level of social anxiety. I get a little bit of social anxiety when I haven't been social in too long, and it's like I'm out of practice. But I felt this tightness, and, I was trying to keep myself calm, get myself loose, but I could feel that I was tight during this presentation. Afterwards, I'm like a pretty I try to be honest. So, I was like, yeah, that was like, I was really nervous. So, like, if that wasn't coming through, that's great. And, a lot of people were giving me really positive feedback. They're like, oh, no, you seemed really chill. You did a really great job presenting. I was like, thank you so much. Like, I'm so glad, because I had this really stressful morning. Like, my nervous system was a wreck. And then, I was getting up in front of people. And so it sort of set the tone for my presentation. Like, I was on edge, and someone in the group who, I speak to a lot, and she's really cool. And, like, we've had a lot of conversations. We know each other. We make sure that we connect every time. Um, we're at this group, and she's like, "Was that your first time presenting?" And I was like, "It was. I haven't done any sort of public speaking in a really long time." And she's like, "Yeah, like, I could tell." She's like, "You should do more. Like, you should start to sign up to present at more places and really work on, like, getting that smoother, getting those nerves out, because I could tell you were, like, really clenched. You were really tight and nervous." And that wasn't challenging to hear, because that was how I felt. But it was so interesting, the contrast between that feedback and what other people were saying, right? Other people were telling me, "Oh, yeah, no, you seemed like the presentation was great. Everything was good." And it's very possible that those people were being nice, or they're just used to people being more nervous during, presentations. And of course, she made the point that, like, you're selling confidence. You want to seem confident when you're presenting. And yes, I think sometimes that's a limiting factor for me, is when I'm nervous, I can't show up confident. It's like, well, then I shouldn't show up, because if I can't show up confident, then I'm misrepresenting my brand. But I also think that a component of confidence is to do it scared, even if you mess up, and to do those things anyway. So I'm glad that I did it, even if I didn't show up perfectly confident. But the point that I wanted to draw upon is this idea of there are always people who aren't paying so much attention to certain things, right? So a lot of the people in the room were not looking with a critical eye at my presentation. And so, maybe they were being nice, but a percentage of them, I would have to believe, did not sense my nerves to that degree where they were like, oh, he's really, really nervous. And she did. She looked at it with this critical eye, and she was able to point out and bring it to my attention, not in a derogatory way. Like, I love feedback. I'm very, very happy to get feedback. And I was actually really glad that somebody noticed. And I think that this is something that's really important. And it's it's really a representation of what I do. So the reason we get stuck in a lot of situations is because people do not know enough to notice that we're stuck. So if I give a presentation to a room of people who can't tell what a presentation should look like, what my slides should look like, what my movements and voice pattern and, like, that they don't have kind of this critical eye of what this should look like, then they cannot give me, not only can't they give me the feedback I need, but they can't give me the constructive feedback I need. The feedback to say, hey, you were challenged in this way, and I think that, this would be a good step forward. This would be a good next step solution. And